Hi, everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino-Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, we're back to the afternoons. Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 114. You still jet lagged, or you're back to U.S. time?
I'm still a little bit jet lagged. I've had some late night calls because I was able to set up some stuff. So wanted to hit while it was still hot and fresh, which unfortunately meant late evening calls. But by the weekend, I think I should be fine. But
yeah, that's expected if we're focusing on China.
1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the eyes are getting heavy. 1 or 2 in the afternoon the last couple of days. So
good to be both back on the same time zone. The force is definitely back in China, judging by the May Day holiday travel and tourism numbers. And following what both of us believe was a watershed-worthy and somewhat record-breaking Shanghai Auto Show. However, the same cannot be said about April EV sales. So let's start there.
With the exception of a couple of brands.
A few. What are your thoughts? And you know, I'll share mine.
You know, I want NIO to break through.
All of us.
And well, part of it is because I feel the products are good. So for them to only get 6,500 in, or 6.7 in sales is really, really disheartening. But you and I had heard some stuff about some of the operational issues, some of the management stuff going on. So I think there's a little bit more to it than just buy, sell. I was really impressed with the 2 visits I made to one, the NIO delivery center, the largest one in the world, and then number 2 to their facility in Xuhui for a one-on-one meeting, or meeting with a couple of people there. And so because you look at Li Auto's numbers, you look at GAC Ion's numbers, and they had solid numbers. BYD is likely going to have really great numbers, but they just haven't. That's the one that kind of stood out to me. So how about you?
Same here. Same here. If we look at the overall picture based on the 15, 16 brands that have announced numbers, one keyword we'd be looking for is consistency. And if we use that as a measuring stick, the only brands or companies, BYD, GAC Ion, Li Auto, maybe Tesla, we don't know the numbers yet, but in terms of a consistent month in, month out, and a momentum that's showing your sales are growing, I think those are the 3 brands that have passing grade. The other ones, not so much.
And let's call out Li Auto because they were at 25,681 units. Over 10,000 of those were L7s. So very impressive number. And then GAC Ion, which was at 41,000 and change. Again, different price segments. So let's just give them credit for really throwing out some big numbers for April when everybody else was pretty much, that we're tracking, everybody else was pretty much under 10,000 units.
Yeah, and Li Auto is probably going on toward 30,000 pretty soon, if not in May, maybe June.
They're firing on all cylinders for sure.
Yeah, and back to NIO a little bit. NIO, you visited their operational points. We both visited, saw the booth at Auto Shanghai. And I mean, they had the Neo House, right? They had the power swap.
There was no lack of enthusiasm. They had those customer ambassadors, that wall
Standing
of
next
customer
to- yeah.
ambassadors, which was totally cool.
So I think compared to that, when you see the numbers, it was a little bit deflating, I would say. And
The sizzle is there. It's just,
I would combine these factors, which are the product changeovers, as they say. So really the ET5 and the ES7, I think, were primary models being delivered in the month, because the EC7, the new ET7, and the all-new ES6, they're starting deliveries this month. So there's that one factor of changeover, okay? Plus, the remnants of whatever operational supply chain, chip, battery, what have you, lingering over. Plus, I personally believe, there is some demand problem that NIO is confronting. So combining all of these is what resulted in a deflating month, I would say.
well, tell them the statistic that you had thrown in the WeChat group chat with Edison.
Yeah, so roughly a third of NIO deliveries went to Shanghai. So they have 320 some thousand customers now. So roughly a third of those
Right.
are in Shanghai. And we had our latest owner joining, half owner joining the fray, our good friend Edison. So
Relative to the new owner, basically.
and I could be a potential owner because I had a fellow add me on WeChat when I visited Neo House in Beijing, and he's been telling me, this is ending by this time, hurry up. So I would say if we talk about the consistency being a measuring stick, I would only give Neo a grade C right now. We've been looking for that, the next level. So 10,000 month in, month out is only a passing grade. It's not superb. We have to see that step up. Otherwise, I mean, there's all these factors that Neo is talking about, but we give it some more time.
If I'm being frank, the ET5 should sell 7,000 units in a month itself.
Which is not.
Exactly. Because if we're looking at the Model 3, that's selling 10, 15,000 units, right? So
yeah, so I think in your newsletter, you pointed out at the very end of your another long rant that not everybody's, you and I, especially you, I think more than I, dunk on the foreign legacies a lot. But sometimes I think you're correct that even these new players,
I'd like to think I'm correct most of the time.
yeah, they are facing some, I would say, there's this Chinese that I would use, which is 危机四伏, which means trouble is brewing from all sides. And out of the Wei Xiaoli, the 3 US listed, I think NIO is facing the most pressure right now. That's how I would put it.
Well, I'm thinking Xpeng is still a little bit more behind NIO, but they are both well behind Li Auto. Let's just say that.
I think they're well behind what we would expect them to be at this point in time. Forget about Li Auto, because Li Auto is a different breed, right? But other than that, the rest of the players, I mean, you have these ones that are selling 1,000, 2,000 units, and they're declaring, for example, the IMLS7, they're declaring that they're the top selling BEV SUV priced above 300,000 units. There's different ways you spin it and you kind of market it and feeling like you're on top of the world. But many of these brands, the list, the leaderboard I posted, I would imagine half of them won't survive in a few years' time.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of concern right now of the startups. We've been giving them a lot of time to prove themselves, and we haven't seen that next level, that momentum. So that's what I'm concerned a little bit.
Yeah, I think if NIO and Xpeng can really take advantage of the second half of 2023, they could build a ton of great momentum moving into 2024, where we'll probably get away completely from the price war, and they'll have fairly mature products in the market. So the G6, I think the G6 should do pretty well. It had a pretty good reception at the show. I know you said that you're not a big fan of the design.
I'm not.
And it's okay. I actually think the G9 looks better.
Same. But what did we say about the P5 when it was launched 2 years ago?
Yeah, but I never thought the P5 was very good looking. I just never thought it was that good looking. And I think the G6 is better looking than the P5 when they've both launched, if we're just thinking about when they launched. And it's an SUV crossover. So
and the telltale sign was Zeekr and Shenlan, which has an interesting English name called Deepaw. Deepaw. I don't understand what that means, but
so for our audience, Shen means deep.
And Lan means blue, so deep blue. But
yeah. So I don't know what the English translation is, but
those two brands surpass both Neo and Zeekr for the time being. We don't draw any conclusions, but Zeekr seems to be on a good momentum if they were to meet their 140,000 target.
If they can quickly ramp the X, I think they'll have massive numbers towards the end of this year.
Yeah.
And one thing to note also, and we're not completely comparing apples to apples, but if we're looking at Denza, which has a couple of products in the market, and the VW ID series, which has 5 or 6 products in the market, Denza beat Volkswagen ID series sales. So in ID series sales, year over year, shrank.
Yeah. Group BV sales was 21,000 some units with 25,000 units. It's right. That's everything. That's including Taycan and Audi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, and did we talk about this last week? So BYD beat Volkswagen brand.
I think we mentioned it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of a huge, in itself, a watershed moment.
That's a passing of the baton that they're likely never going to get back.
Right.
But the CFO did say that they were redoubling efforts to gain share back into Asia. And when he says Asia, he means China.
Yeah, I think based on what these CEOs and CFOs posted on social media, let's say for Volkswagen, taking Volkswagen, for example, it sounds as if they're very positive, that they're very satisfied and that they're very looking forward to regrowing that getting that mojo back. I'm not sure, but that's the feeling that I get,
I think they have to try to project confidence because the last thing they want is team morale to be just dropping to zero.
I mean, we know that there's probably some executive shuffle brewing behind the scenes. And we just saw Rupert Stadler, right? What he's the former Audi boss, what he's going to do with the emissions scandal, right? Yeah.
Yes, he's going to stay out of jail, is what he's going to do. He was fined 1.2 million euro or something like that.
Yeah, and also looking at the Volkswagen Group, they announced their quarterly numbers, just 600 some thousand units. So that's a run rate of in the first quarter. So for the year, they probably will get to 2.5 million, but that's 1.5 million off. They did 4 million, right? Before the pandemic. I think 2019 was over 4 million.
That's a massive reduction.
And which, we kind of transitioned to what Ford.
Let me add to that real quick. When you have a delta that large, the pressure is on exporting in order to keep the factories going and factories open. Because when you lose 1 million plus units of sales over that shorter period of time, that creates a lot of pressure to export the excess supply. So look for Volkswagen later this year to increase exports from China. And this dovetails well into what you were just about to discuss, Ford's revised massage strategy that Jim Farley announced on Tuesday.
Yeah, in a earnings call. And actually, I like it, to be honest with you, because different from Volkswagen Group, Ford has a much smaller, I would say, exposure. So I think it's a bit easier for Jim to make that kind of announcement and just say, it's an important market, but we have to focus a little bit. And it looks like the pendulum is clearly swaying toward JMC for some reason with the commercial business.
Because it's profitable.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. And so for a company like Ford, I think it's actually very practical and frugal to do this. Meaning that, he said it clear, right? We can't serve everyone. Well, if you can, then don't.
I think to create some context for our listeners, in 2016, I think Ford sold around 1.1, 1.2 million units. Last year, they were just under 500,000 passenger vehicles.
Not even that much. I don't think. It's more like 200, 300,000.
Maybe including commercial then, sorry. But total sales, less than 500,000. So percentage-wise, it's a similar drop, I think, to Volkswagen. But to your point, when you get into the 300,000 unit number for passenger vehicles, you are struggling to sell. So
yeah, so Ford would be in danger of selling less this year, let's say the PV side, in China than Li Auto. Because I think Li Auto is on their way to 300,000 units if the current momentum holds. That's, again, very deflating. So I think Jim was just being, real, right? So I think it's good, but
I applaud them just like I applauded GM for taking Apple out of their digital ecosystem. These are tough decisions that need to be made.
But it's very difficult for a company like Volkswagen Group to say that we can't serve everyone and we're gonna, do something that Ford is doing. It's right. It's
not when they're selling 8 brands in the market.
I mean, yeah. And now introducing possibly another brand disguised behind the Cupra, right? So I don't know.
Well, they need to get rid of Skoda, full stop. You and I completely agree that.
Yeah, Skoda is done.
They cannot consistently sell in the quantities that they are and expect not to close factories in the near future. So I think we have to look at that. If there's another year or 2 or 18 months of really anemic Volkswagen brand sales, it's going to constrain their ability to really, really make bold moves.
And spending €1 billion on that 100% tech co. This is not something that Ford would be doing, I would imagine. So,
yeah. But Farley basically, he was interviewed for a Wall Street Journal event yesterday, I think, and said that we just can't assume or hope that we can reskill or upskill all of our current employees. So I love his frankness. I think Jim is probably the closest to being as honest to the media, to the public, to the street as any CEO. To your point, specifically pointing to the Volkswagen Group people, I don't know how realistic what they're saying is when you compare it to a Jim Farley, because I think Jim just is embracing this harsh reality and trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, he would be a less, let's say, a Carlos Tavares, which is very vocal, and Jim will be a little bit more toned down, kind of, but still real and being frank.
But he effectively said, we're going to leave the market passenger vehicle wise.
Yeah. The thing is, though, you look at the China numbers and then you look at the financial numbers. These companies are still very healthy financially. Porsche, Volkswagen Group, Ford, right? Where do they make their profits? Some more depending on China, some more depending obviously on North America. So this is a balancing act. And like I said sometime before, that you really have to think about China. Really, the position of China is important. But if you want to, it's a balance between being profitable and volume, right? And that's what's happening, I think, with some of the recent pricing moves by Tesla in both China and the US, right?
Well, Tesla raised prices last week or this week in China?
I said it's because of margins, because it fell to below 20%, and it's a very psychological threshold. And I think the other point,
Street put a ton of pressure on them too.
yeah, I think the other point is the China market. I think there was a lot of hold and see, kind of holding the pocket from the consumer. So now that Tesla's raised prices, it's almost like, hey, come buy our products. We're not going to be dropping Model 3 to below 200,000 RMB. So you can stop waiting and just...
I think that was a relief to the rest of the market and the rest of the brands too, because now they don't have to follow them down a price war, or price reduction war. So I don't know, maybe Tesla feels pretty good about their outlook for the rest of the year in China. So
we'll see the numbers in the coming months. But I think we all agree that the price reductions announced at the beginning of the year have not had the desired effect that many people expected. So,
which you and I talked about, because I said this late last year, the law of diminishing returns will come into play when they have so many price reduction. So, and that's exactly what kind of happened.
And for somebody like a Tesla, I think they can go either way pretty quickly throughout the year.
Yes, they are the anomaly, because they make moves pretty extremely and then pretty quickly, both ways, in both directions, which is jarring if you're following the traditional automotive ways. They do things really what seems like willy-nilly. And so to traditional auto journalists and stuff, it's just jarring for them to do these up and down, down kind of things. So
and then the overall market itself. So CPCA predicted April EV sales was going to be around 500,000. So the 15 or 16 brands I tabulated was over 380,000. So that's what, like 2/3, 70% almost.
Yeah.
But I think the numbers always end up higher. So it's going to be a little bit more than 500,000 units. But still, it's not at the level at the end of last year. And
it still should be a positive year, but not 100% growth, obviously. So, which we got used to, because it was 2 years in a row that was basically 100% growth. And now we sound disappointed, but it's still going to be a pretty solid year for NEV sales.
Yeah, I'm no longer as confident as my 10 million prediction.
Yeah, dude. I should have bet you dinner or something.
I think that's it on sales. You want to talk about your end of your China trip a little bit?
Sure. So last week I was in Beijing, and unfortunately wasn't able to schedule my Li Auto trip, because I would have loved to spend a bit more time in a L7 driving it around and everything, but timing was just too tight. So we'll have to do that this summer. And then went down to Shanghai. And what's funny is that Bill Russo and I had been on a panel discussion on CGTN at like 7:30 in the morning. And then we were both sharing the stage. He as the moderator, I as a panelist for AmCham Shanghai. And we talked about completely different things. He went over the sales numbers for...
I remember doing the same thing in April 2019. So both of us has done it.
Yeah. And so did that, and then jumped on a plane to Shenzhen and went down there, was able to visit BYD and spent a day checking out their facility. Was really impressed.
Was that your first time?
And yeah, it was my first time to BYD.
It's the Pentagon? No, not the Pentagon. It's the Octagon.
Octagon,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, maybe it's Pentagon.
It's the sixth side. What's the word for sixth side?
I forget. Pentagon is 5.
Hexagon
Pentagon is 5. Yeah, it's but what was cool is, you go to these campuses and you always see these prototypes with the camouflage. And they had Denza prototypes, they have Yangwang, they had the Yeah, so they had BYD prototypes, and so there are three brands that were kind of driving around, and I'm trying to take pictures, and they're like, no, 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 and so as a guest, you try to play, follow the rules, whatever. So was really impressed. Unfortunately, I go in there, and they're like, oh, we're gonna do the drill test on the NCM battery, and then on the Blade battery, and I pulled out my phone late and wasn't able to record the NCM battery getting drilled into and then exploding. But then at the end, they take me to like the parking lot, and there's like all these cars parked. Unfortunately, no Seagull, so I didn't get to drive a Seagull. But UN Plus, Han Pang, Denza 009 I got to drive.
D9.
And
009
D9. 009 is the Zeekr. I said that to them too, and I caught myself. But it's just confusing. The D9 009, so I can be confused. I'm going to give myself a little slack for that. But you got to drive the Han. They're solid cars. I told you that, or I told them that if they're going to price premium in Europe, they probably need to up their game on the fit and finish on the interiors for sure. But, dynamic driving dynamics, acceleration, no complaints. The digital infotainment systems worked. If I had a complaint, if I had an area of improvement for them, I'd say that it probably needs to be a little more sophisticated, and so I think they're going to sell a bunch of those. Almost every single car I got into, I think they're going to be selling a lot of them. And they realize that there's room for improvement for sure, but they're also shipping these cars into Latin America, Southeast Asia, where it's not this sophisticated passenger vehicle market. So they're just going to grab volume where they can and just be leaders in these other markets. And I think I'd mentioned this before. They've entered 51 markets. It looks like they just entered Ecuador now.
Ecuador, yeah.
And so they are definitely all gas, no brakes. And as long as they can keep churning them out, manufacturing them, I think that they're going to sell everything they make. And then in the late afternoon, so I was in Nanshan, then I went to Pingshan, and then I went to Futian districts in Shenzhen. And DeepRoute was in Futian. Went to DeepRoute, which is an autonomous vehicle company. For those that have followed the podcast before, we interviewed the founder CEO or co-founder CEO, Maxwell Zhou, a while ago. He was one of our first guests. Very entertaining, very informative. And so we've been fans of DeepRoute for a long time. They've been fans of ours because I think we were their first real Western exposure. So they got a lot of good publicity out of that podcast. And then I got to try out a Driver 2.0 vehicle. It was a IM, and there was a safety driver. We drove through Futian, was pretty impressed. And relative, if I'm doing a comparison, I'd ridden in 3 at this point: the Baidu, the QCraft, and then the DeepRoute. DeepRoute was probably the second smoothest ride in of the 3, and so really impressed as well. They are focused on partnering with OEMs to get their hardware software stacks on mass-produced vehicles. So that's going to be their strategy.
There's a real race on that L2 plus ADAS from these self-driving startups, WeRide included, right? So, yeah.
She seemed, Corinne, who I spoke with, unfortunately, I was unable to sit down and meet with Maxwell. We'll have to do that again. I'll have to come down again to sit down and talk with him. Maybe you and I can coordinate this summer, spend a couple days down south or something. And then got to meet up with Taylor and Jack and Bridget at the Snowball Capital office. Do
they have a penthouse in Shenzhen now?
Yeah, they were in the highest ranked district of like Nanshan, like in Beijing in CBD, there's that one tower where all the private equity companies are. That's basically the building, similar to the building. And I was like, wow, dude. And then they had this small office and that they were sharing. And then we went and called a Pony AI, and we rode that thing for 53 minutes. And it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, so traffic was high, a lot of bikes, a lot of delivery vehicles, a lot of buses. I was really impressed
with the safety driver, right?
With the safety driver. So the only vehicle that I rode in without a safety driver was the Baidu.
On the driver's side or on the passenger side?
On the driver's side.
Driver's side, okay.
Yeah, and so what is impressive about the Pony is that it's point to point. So we can kind of sort of go anywhere, and versus QCraft and DeepRoute, I think they were predetermined routes, okay? With Pony, Taylor had rerouted or changed the destination 25 minutes into the ride, and I have recorded it, and I will try to post it on somewhere, maybe on my YouTube channel that I haven't created yet. But I do have to say that there are 4 companies. I think 2 of them are not part of that research company's autonomous vehicle scorecard. And all 4 of them should be on there for sure. So we're out there getting it done, Lei. You and I, we're out there getting it done. So, man, Pony, very impressive to be quite frank, because it was by far the heaviest trafficked autonomous vehicle that I'd ever ridden in.
Yeah.
Shenzhen is the traffic isn't as intense as a Beijing or Shanghai, but it was nasty. There were some weird roads that we rode on that had not typical 4-way intersections, So
we need to come up with our own AV leaderboard.
Right? Yes. And what's the key, and one of the things that I talked to DeepRoute about, is that the local characteristics need to be programmed into each autonomous vehicle. So an AV driving around in Shanghai should act and feel differently than an AV riding around Beijing versus Changsha versus Wuhan versus Shenzhen. It needs to feel like the local traffic. And so I don't know, and I got the impression that DeepRoute felt the same way, that there could ever be a universal robotaxi where it doesn't matter where you put it, it just knows.
It localizes.
Because there's local habits.
That's what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be kind of set parameters from a local standpoint that a universal robotaxi might not be able to discern on its own without this specific information and programmed into it.
That's why you have these local operations testing going on before they're rolled out, right? It's a step-by-step process, as we've seen. Same in China and the US, right? But
at the BYD stop, I even went on that Sky Train. So
yeah,
I got to do that.
You didn't get to do a Yunyan, the one with one wheel falling off. You didn't get to do that.
Yeah, I didn't get to do that. No. Well, next time we're there, we got to go drive the Yangwang, right?
Yeah. So quickly on the BYD numbers, basically the first 4 months were three quarters of a million units. So they should easily get to 2.5. And if we count better second year half of the year, they probably need to get to 300,000 a month at some point late in the year to get to 3 million, I think. So, April was not a huge increase from March from BYD's perspective. It's a little bit lower than expected, but we'll see, especially, speaking of the Seagull, the other model that went onto that leaderboard was the Bingo. which had the 16,000 in the first month. And I'm expecting the Seagull to be at least double that to be really successful with all the expectations that poured in.
Yeah, and the thing is with BYD, once they launch or introduce a vehicle, I think within 3 months they are delivering it. So
yeah, so basically the A0 segment is completely electrified, BEV electrified. So now the same thing is happening in the A0 segment with the Bingo and the Seagull. So
it's going to be a fun competition to watch because the Seagull is the closest thing to fully featured. The Bingo in the Hongguang Mini is a really, really simple interior, whereas the Seagull is close to like just a normal car. Okay.
I would say the Bingo is a specialty, whereas the Seagull is the everyday,
more mainstream.
Yeah, more mainstream. Yeah,
exactly. I completely agree. Which gives it broader appeal. So yeah, that was so very, very eventful.
Yeah, you had a full 2.5 week China trip. Mine was a little bit short, but still.
And it is 3:50. I know we have a hard stop at 4:00, but I want to open the room up. But I do want to talk about my Shenzhen to Hong Kong trip. That was a bit.
It wasn't that smooth. Are you saying?
Interesting. Man. So
you take the boat?
No, my buddies were like, take the subway.
Oh, a subway. Okay.
So for the folks that aren't aware, you have to go through customs to get to Hong Kong from Shenzhen.
Of course.
So you have to leave China and enter Hong Kong. Two customs, just like any other country, in entering and exiting countries. And then I talked to Taylor, and Taylor's like, no, there's a fast train. There's a Gaotia, right? 15 minutes. And so I'm like, okay. So I'll take that I went to the Shenzhen Nanjing, and my DD driver was like the slowest. And I get there 15 minutes before the train's supposed to leave, and he drops me off.
And you don't have your ticket yet, right? Because you still need to pick up a physical ticket, don't you?
No physical tickets.
Okay.
I did not need a physical tickets. And then if you're carrying a foreign passport, there is a special line if you're carrying a foreign passport. So I was fully confident when I left the hotel that I would make it in time. But of course, this DD driver was 7 minutes later than originally scheduled.
Where's Pony when you needed it?
Yeah, man. And he was just so not aggressive because you remember this, going into the train stations, it becomes a parking lot once you get like half a kilometer away from the front door.
And then you got to get in line to go into the actual waiting area.
Yeah. And it starts raining, and the guy's like, let me just drop you off here. Let me just drop you off here. And I have no idea where the door is because I've never been to this train station. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to save me more time, sitting in this car going 0.00 kilometers an hour or just getting out and walking. So I finally get out because I have suitcases, right? So go, and then miss my train.
Oh boy.
And but the good thing is it was like 100 RMB. It was 100 RMB, so about $15. So I'll eat that. I'll just say I paid $30 for a train. And so got on the next train, and 16 minutes, boom. And of course, I'm high maintenance because I got the first class ticket. If it was second class, it would have been like 90 RMB or 80 RMB. And so go there, and then go through China customs, no problem. And then had to walk like 10 minutes to get to the Hong Kong, Kowloon. Yeah. And then going through customs for Hong Kong, it took forever. And then I pass customs through Hong Kong, and I walk to the Kowloon station, the subway station, because we're at the train station, and underground you can walk to the subway station. I walk to the subway station and try to buy a subway ticket because I'm meeting some friends in Central, and I was supposed to meet them at 4. It is 5 o'clock now, and I go to the ticket counter or the automatic ticket thing. It doesn't take my WeChat because it's Hong Kong, it's not China. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so
That's
I'm
right.
like, okay,
That's
I need
right.
cash.
I couldn't either.
So yeah, right. And because you needed to put you needed to get your ID matched to the WeChat. Yes.
Yeah.
So I go to the ATM. I get money out. None of the ticket machines take cash. They only take coins. So I go to the freaking pastry shop and I'm like, can you make change? And like, no. And I'm like, what? She's like, I can't open the drawer. So I buy this, 15 Hong Kong dollar pastry that I put in my pocket that I didn't even eat. So I get change and I finally get my train ticket, my subway ticket. And I go to Central, and then the restaurant that I'm meeting them at is like a 30-minute walk from the subway stop. And I have one big suitcase, one small suitcase, and a backpack. And the big suitcase is because my wife bought all this crap that I had to mule back.
Hope your wife is not listening.
So I go up. Well, and because Hong Kong is all hills, right? And so I'm like, and none of the roads are like super flat. So everything's like boom, 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 boom. So I jump in a cab. I go to Central, and that's fine. But man, I didn't get to the restaurant until 6 o'clock. I was supposed to meet them at 4. And then that morning, I had spent 3 hours on the phone with Expedia in order to try to change my ticket. And so I was supposed to leave on Wednesday, but because of May holiday, I wanted to leave early because there wouldn't have been, it would have just been me sitting in a hotel getting work done, which is fine, but I'd rather just go home early. So I ended up leaving at 1:45 a.m. So I drank some beers, we had some dinner, and then got on the Hong Kong Express at around 10 p.m. at night and was dehydrated because I drank so much beer. Go to Hong Kong, and everything's pretty uneventful. And so
the Airport Express is a great way to travel. That's what I did when I headed back to Beijing.
So sorry. Some of this was kind of personal experience as opposed to like car talk and EV talk.
But no, I mean, this is important because for me, right? So I went to Hong Kong first and then Beijing, Shanghai. So 3 completely different, they're all China, right? But completely different feel, vibe. And it was just interesting to experience not only the cultural aspect, but mobility aspect of it. Because we talk about mobility and there's different ways that you need to be aware of to get around. And in Shanghai, during the auto show, the best way to get around is through the Hello bike, right? The share bike.
And the subway, right? Because rookie mistake, if you get into a cab at Hongqiao from the auto show and you're trying to get into Jing'an, forget about it. That's 2 hours. That's 2 hours right there.
Yeah, and then in Shanghai in particular, more often than not, you get into a EV cab if you're doing Didi.
Yes.
Right? I posted the Chevrolet Menlo.
And again, they're not super comfortable because where your feet are is flat. And if you're in an ICE, the part where you put your feet is sunken in, so your knees can kind of bend perpendicular as opposed to kind of pressed up against your chest. And so the BEVs are a bit more uncomfortable in that regard, but they're getting better. The last thing is I noted this in this week's newsletter. I was in Shanghai, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and then Hong Kong. Maglev, plane, a lot of walking, a lot of bike riding.
Yeah, everything.
DD. And so I didn't think about it until I thought about it. And I was like, you know what? I use pretty much every form of transportation you can imagine.
The only thing I didn't do this trip is Gaotie. I only had 6 days in China, so it was either flying or,
I love the Gaotie, man.
Yeah.
I took a second class ticket and I was in the middle seat, of course. And so on the way back to Shanghai, I bought the first class and it was nice.
And here, stateside, it's nothing.
It's so uneventful. Taking the maglev is so uneventful. And it goes 325 kilometers an hour. So
yeah, here in the stateside, it's nothing but driving. the miles that you rack up on your car is just every day you see the odometer, it just keeps going up.
Yeah,
and in China is totally different.
It's a shame. I appreciate the highways that we have, but I would much rather get on a fast train, a maglev, a Gaotia,
Yeah.
and go to Chicago, go to Pittsburgh, because honestly, if you've never experienced a maglev or a fast train or bullet train, it is, you can get on the internet, you can walk around. There's virtually no turbulence, and it's restful, because on a plane, you feel like a sardine. You're packed in there, and 4.5 hours, because that's how long it takes for the fast train from Beijing to Shanghai. It goes by so fast, and you can actually get work done because you have enough room. You can put your computer on your lap or on that little table that they give you. So I was super productive for the 8.5 or 9 hours that I was in and the best thing about it, I think it was like $60 or like 300 or 400 RMB one way.
Yeah.
In the United States, if the airlines had competition like that, oh my God, they would provide so much better customer service and be cheaper. And then the other thing too, if the last thing I'll rant about is Asian airlines versus American airlines. The customer service and the friendliness of the staff is completely different. So
on my flight from Hong Kong to Beijing, it's an Air China flight, and one of the pursers, or a depurser, was actually the wife of someone I knew. So I thanked him again.
Nice.
That was great service. Yeah.
Well, Air China is Mamahu. I flew Air Korea, or Korean Air. So I flew Korean Air. It was amazing, super nice. And then like I fly Delta, and they could be bothered, right? Like, and it's just night and day from a service standpoint.
But whatever, just thankful that we got to experience everything, right? For the good and for the bad. Gives you a much more perspective on things. So that's we're all thankful for that.
And it feels normal,
yeah,
to be able to fly internationally again.
Definitely, definitely.
So
without masking, stuff like that. So
Beijing and Shanghai for both of us is like nothing. We can get around. We know where to go. We still have good friends in both places, and so it's those two cities are super friendly for me. But anyways, if no one has any questions, we will close the room up for today.
Yeah, I gotta head out. So, but good episode.
And then next week, we're going to drop our Max episode. So look out for that Chris Hine from Carwow.
Yeah, and some of the earlier episodes that we're still working on. We'll get those out.
Yes, we'll get those out too. Apologies, but we were behind on a few things. But hey, thanks for joining, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Yes, same here. And may the 4th be with you. Bye-bye.
Bye. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.